conservation, respectively. Poor old Bank of New Zealand, losing so much money, obviously. Money is tight and time is short. To discuss how best to spend both, we have a learned panel. Let me introduce them briefly. Nicola Torkey, the Threatened Species Ambassador for the Department of Conservation. James Ross, Senior Lecturer in Wildlife Management at Lincoln University. Te Awhina Arahanga, a curator and researcher. Her affiliations include Ngai Tahu. Dr. Mike Thorson, a Dunedin ecologist who helped establish the Endangered Species Foundation last year. Dr. Bill Lee, conservation ecologist at Land Care Research and the University of Auckland, and Professor Steve Ratton, Professor of Ecology here at Lincoln. Please welcome them tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Can I invite each of the panelists to give us a brief opening statement, beginning with Nicola Torkey?
Sure. Kia ora koutou. I'm Nicola Torkey and I'm the Threatened Species Ambassador for the Department of Conservation. It's a new role and one I'm embracing with a lot of challenges and opportunities. So it's a role that's really important because New Zealand has the dubious honour of having the highest proportion of threatened species of any country in the world, despite our clean green reputation. We have 985 threatened species at last count, another 2,700 and something at risk, and there's about 4,300 that are just data deficient. We don't know exactly how many there are, where they are, so we can't classify them yet as threatened. It's likely there's some in there. I guess the guts of my job is to raise profile and awareness of our threatened species with the New Zealand public. And to me, that's really crucial because we're not going to save any species unless the public, the people of New Zealand, are motivated to do so. And at a time when The Bachelor is rating its socks off, this becomes really challenging. I learnt last week when I was out with David Bond, a filmmaker from the UK, who produced an incredible film called Project Wild Thing, that New Zealand kids are spending 6 hours a day on average in front of a screen. That's our Kiwi kids. So that includes, kids like my kid. We live in a rural area and he spends a lot of time outside, and he certainly spends a lot of time struggling with me for the iPad. So people want to know, in order to get people to protect this stuff, we have to get them to love it. And people won't love something that they haven't experienced. And in the space of a generation, New Zealand has gone from a largely rural community that was connected to its bush and its beaches and what have you, to 87% of us now being townies. So that presents a whole range of challenges in terms of motivating a public enough to impress upon its government the need to protect its species. And in New Zealand, more than anything, our species are part of our hearts and souls, not to mention our engine room of our number one industry in our economy right now, which is, of course, tourism. So more than any other country in the world, New Zealanders' national identity hinges on nature, and that was proven in a study a few years ago that classified defining characteristics of citizens, and other citizens said democracy and freedom of speech and liberty and all that, and obviously we take that for granted because we said our connection to nature. So I guess we've got a decision to make as a country about whether that connection to nature means enough for us to commit to doing something about it. I guess part of my role is to also not only to wave the flag. Quite often colleagues ask me if I just go around patting Kiwi all day. Sometimes I do. But to wave the flag also for the little things. So the things like the robust grasshopper of the Mackenzie, the threatened plants that we can't even pronounce the names of yet. And to try to get that elevated and things. Is that like I've got 5 minutes to go or I'm done? I'm out. Anyway, unless we experience it, we can't love it. And if we don't love it, we won't protect it.
Thank you, Nicola. James?
I'm just going to say, Nicola, well, wait for the applause.
That's all very nice, but we haven't got time to applaud everyone.
No clapping.
Moving along.
And you're done.
So as an ambassador, basically, which probably means you've got a face designed for television, I certainly have a face designed for radio. So I'll talk about my bit today. I recently watched a video describing conservation in New Zealand as a war. If you haven't seen it, it's well worth a look. And according to latest dispatches, it's a war that we're losing on the mainland. So in a recent science report from Landcare, changes in bird abundance were compared from the 1970s to the early 2000s. And what came out in that report was pretty scary. So once we had 200 individual species before humans arrived here, 40% are gone, okay? Already gone. Of the remaining 96 or 100 species or so, 26 of them are currently not threatened. Not very many out of 200. Within the rest, basically, 16 species have numbers so low that we can't actually even monitor them. Okay? We can't even reliably say what's going to happen with them next because their numbers are so low. So what the report highlights is for birds in New Zealand that A, most are in decline. Okay, it's scary stuff. And what makes it even scarier is the decline is greatest in the South Island. Okay, where else? Within intact native forest. So it's not on farmland or places where lifestylers are going or anything like that. It's an intact native forest and in inland river basins, far away from cities and development. Essentially, the report said that the rare are becoming rarer. And that's a sad state for a country where 30% of our land area comes under some form of legal protection. So to put that in perspective, there's 70,000 kiwi left in all of New Zealand. We're losing them at 2% per annum. That's 27 per week. All kiwi could be extinct on the New Zealand mainland within a generation, okay? 50 years, they're gone. How is this happening? We are at war with introduced mammalian pests. Certainly we have saved some species from extinction on offshore islands, over which we have 100 of them, but as a total area, it's 36,000 hectares, roughly the same size as Great Barrier Island. Okay, that's all that we've protected. So what must we do? Exterminate them all? Well, with the current pest control box, it would cost us basically to make predator-free New Zealand $25 billion. So I'm not asking for that, okay, which is probably why the predator-free people are saying 2050, okay? With the current toolbox, we can't do that. What can we do in the meantime? Well, they've priced it out. To control and protect birds in the South Island, $14 million a year. What does that equate to? Well, we already spend $50 million a year on possum control, basically, just to get rid of or try and eradicate bovine TB. It's about half a flag referendum, $17 million. Okay, it's not much money. Just to throw it in there as well, we could make Stewart Island predator-free for $50 million. That's 2 flag referendums, basically $50 million, and we could protect Stewart Island. So I refuse, Kim, I refuse to sit here tonight and rationally discuss what we're going to sacrifice, okay? What I suggest is we need to get serious about what makes us uniquely New Zealanders, and we can save what's there without bankrupting the country, okay? It's about having the right priorities and telling people, certain people, where they should be spending our money. Whew, I'll have a wine.
I give up. Te awhina.
Tēnā rā koutou katoa me te whānau moki, tēnā koutou katoa. Me te hoki mai i te whānau katoa, tēnā koutou katoa. E nā mihi ana tūpuna, me te kōrero o nā tūpuna, haramai te toki, haumie, huie, tāike, tihei mauriora. I tend to, most mornings, walk around Hagley Park. And there is a particular place in Hagley Park that I've noticed carcasses of dead bumblebees. And I thought this was particularly odd, that these bumblebees were sacrificing themselves on a footpath in Hagley Park. And as I went past one day, I noticed there was a bumblebee and a wasp fighting it out on the footpath. I instantly, without even thinking, smashed it with my foot. And I realised at that point of time, I had played God. I had decided at that moment, at that time, to destroy 2 creatures. And I thought to myself, retrospectively, how many times has it been that I have, as a person, accidentally, instantaneously destroyed a creature? And I thought for a while, I definitely haven't stamped on any kiwis lately, and I definitely haven't stepped on any tuataras lately. But what I had thought in my mind is because I probably have stood on a few creatures that are small, microscopic and unseen. And as I sat and read the endangered species list, I noticed that under the threatened species, that the cute factor of birds were 25. And then I noticed that beetles were 40. And then I noticed freshwater invertebrates were 47. And then I noticed that vesicular plants was 155. And I thought to myself, I think I've been doing a lot of stamping and not really thinking. On Monday, I sat in a meeting, a very interesting meeting, between Ngaitahu and DOC as we discussed species recovery. And we had the deputy of DOC with us, Bruce Parks, and he said this really interesting point. He said when he started the job 2 months ago, he wanted to know who was in charge of Kiwi. And probably in the state of what DOC is, nobody could say who it was or put their hand up. He then said, well, who do we shoot when we make the Kiwi extinct? And I think a few fingers were pointed directly at him. So for me, what I have noticed is that we are inadvertently, instantaneously stamping our feet quite often without realising that the microscopic and the ugly and the unseen and the smelly are being destroyed. And unfortunately, holistically, those are the creatures that need to be looked after and made sure that they are not endangered. After all, what is a kiwi going to eat? What is a kakapo going to eat? And if we can't look after a simple caddisfly, if we can't look after beetles, and I've got this vision in my head. How many of you have seen Rachel Hunter out there with kakapo? Well, I'm trying to imagine her sort of, rescuing 40 beetles. And I found this really interesting fact. 4 of the creatures that are also critically endangered are lice, bird lice. And so I am now picturing Rachel Hunter with her 4 lice. And on that note, we have to be careful as humans of playing God. And in short, we talked about how we were going to save endangered species, and I said, I think we should call the project Bob. And everybody laughed at me, and I said, why can't we call it Bob? We can have every kid in a primary school saying, let's save Bob. So tonight, if anything, we can go out and say, let's save Bob.
Mike Thorson.
Yeah, well, I got invited onto this, and it was like, well, what species should we save? And I thought the answer was pretty damn obvious, really.
Us.
I'd be quite happy if we didn't save us. But all of them, why not? We have the capacity, we have the abilities, we can be able to do it. New Zealand was a leader in world conservation. Notice I say was a leader. There's other countries overseas now doing more innovative conservation programs than we're doing here. We used to be the leader of the pack. We're now just part of the pack. I think we can change that. I think people here can change that. It's not up to DOC, it's not up to the scientists, it's not up to the professionals, it's up to everybody. Anybody can make a bit of a difference. And that's where this foundation that we set up last year was wanting to come in, was to help people help themselves and help the species around them. And it doesn't matter what they are. Who knows what will interest somebody? And, it might be the bird lice. That may be very, very exciting to some people. I know it's very exciting to a few scientists. And we were up yesterday, we were up in the Seaward Kaikoura ranges, up in the Pui ranges. And it was hailing down, well, not quite hailing, but it was almost horizontal rain. It was wet and it was windy, and we were up there looking at a liverwort. And hopefully most of you know what a liverwort is, but it looks like a green plant, but it's not for those who aren't. A better description would be a small fleck of seaweed on the clay bank. And we were there with a liverwort expert from Landcare Research here, and we were talking about the possibilities, and so I said to him, how many liverwort conservation programs there are in New Zealand? And he said, I think this is the first one. And then he thought about it for a bit longer, and he said, actually, I think this might be the first one in the world. So, we can pull it back. We can be leaders again. We can do all sorts of different things. And it can be just normal, ordinary people. Doesn't have to be anybody particularly flash. So, yeah, it's up to us. Cheers, Kim.
Bill Lee.
I think as Kim alluded to at the start, we're all aware that biological extinction is a normal part of what life faces, but the accelerated rate at which it's occurring at the moment is something of incredible concern. Particularly in New Zealand, if we have 60,000 taxa excluding microbes, we can see the situation for birds, for amphibians, for lizards, for snails and insects is steadily worsening. And that's partly because humans occupied New Zealand relatively recently, and the biota that we faced when we arrived here was somewhat inconvenient for the uses that we wanted to put it to. Now, if we want to maintain a full range of biological diversity, I think prioritisation should occur along three variables. First of all, the most vulnerable to loss. Secondly, what will contribute most to future diversity. And thirdly, what creates a healthy environment for New Zealanders. Now, I'd like to see the focus not so much on species, but on ecosystems, because that's how I think biodiversity is stacked. It's a hierarchy, a nested hierarchy. And if we focus on ecosystems, we can actually get more bangs for our conservation buck, because we have co-located species that benefit from the actions that we apply. But also, if we focus on ecosystems, it secures microbial biodiversity, the biodiversity that we never see, by and large. If we try and prioritise function, we run into problems, because for most species we have no idea what they do, and that tends to mean that you look after the common and you destroy most of the variety. So if we focus on species, I suspect we'll always go for the cute and the large, and although that has some merit, I think we leave the rest alone. For endangered animals, of course, in the New Zealand context, predators, and virtually getting rid of all of them is important and an essential goal. We're able to do that in confined spaces really well, but in terms of landscapes, we still face big challenges in reducing predator numbers. Plants are actually more problematic because they're not protected by legislation, and also they face multiple threats that are complicated to control, like weeds and grazing and other disturbances. Habitat loss in New Zealand continues in the current wave of land use intensification. And one of the big things big challenges we face is to incentivise private landowners to protect biodiversity, because that's where most of our threatened species are in the current context. The problem with land use intensification is that it escalates hugely conservation costs in the future. And so I think that's something we've got to get our head around. So I think threatened species are a necessary conservation hook, if you like, and they'll always be important. But I think biodiversity is better protected when we focus on ecosystems generally. Thank you.
And Steve Ratton.
Thanks. I'm going to pick up on one or two themes you've heard already, and like James possibly, I'm going to be a bit naughty, and I think I don't like the question very much. Sorry, Kim. I think...
There's always one, right?
Yeah, quite, yes. Well, it's two, actually. Yeah, quite. James will support me. So I don't think it's about saving species A or B. I think it is about saving biodiversity, whatever economic value it may or may not have. And I also think it's to do with how we allocate our money, as James has implied. And I did a bit of searching yesterday. I mean, the motorway that's being built around Christchurch now, which I don't find a very unpleasant thing to drive on, 1 billion. The ring road around Auckland, 1.2 billion. So it's to use a stupid phrase maybe, it's a worshipping of a false god. not getting religious here, and that false god is GDP, which was invented in the 1940s when the world was in depression after 2 wars. And it measures money flow, right? So if I crash my car on that horrible motorway twice this year compared with one last, I'm contributing to GDP. If I murder somebody, heaven help us, contributes to GDP. So what I'm really doing then, to emphasize that, is today I'm wearing my biodiversity hat, not my species extinction hat. And here is my biodiversity hat. Oh, yes, thank you very much. It took a lot of sellotape to do this. And just to put another perspective, there's all this talk about the Central Plains water. Well, at the moment, 355 million they're asking. Well, we know what's happening to dairying, and someone said, oh, we're going to grow nuts on it. Oh, for God's sake. 355 million to grow nuts. So people are going a bit nuts. The other thing that I like quoting quite often is on the Canterbury Plains where we are now, I'll take this stupid thing off, half of 1% of the original plant biodiversity, half of 1% remains. I'm ashamed to even say that, okay? And then we have what James mentioned, we have all the horrible things. And some biodiversity we don't want to save. We don't want to save stupid cats. We don't want to save stupid rats. But as many other people have said, there are things we never see that I think we have a duty bound to save. This is a rare grasshopper from the Mackenzie Basin. It's even rarer now because there's one on this table. I'd like to save it, but GDP would say it doesn't contribute to GDP, throw it away. So I think GDP is the horrible cause of a lot of this, and it's driving, if I may allude to politics, it's driving this government's policies, okay? So I'd like to finish briefly with some other aspect of biodiversity which I do cherish, and it isn't just that it's there, although existence value is important. If one of those kiwis we heard about went extinct, or if all of them went extinct, we would certainly care about that. Most Kiwi adults, people, have never seen a wild kiwi. If we lost them, we'd go mad. So we shouldn't forget extinction. Shouldn't forget the value of these things even if we don't see them, existence value. And also, poets and writers for hundreds of years have been inspired by biodiversity, and we should never throw that away. And there's a lovely poem I know from a Chilean poet. He won the Nobel Prize for Poetry, actually, called Pablo Neruda. And in English he said, I wandered the world in search of life. Bird by bird, I came to know the earth. And I think that's lovely. I'm also motivated by Elizabeth Browning, which is something obliquely sounds like it's a comment on dairying. And she said, for some, a tree is a source of joy. For others, it's a green thing in the way. Look at a dairy farm. So 0.5% diversity left on Canterbury Plains, talking about kiwis or kakakos or kaka, I don't actually care. I care about spending money where it should be spent. And then a very important thing that would enter our society, not GDP, but GPI, and that means Genuine Progress Indicator. It's about time some of our politicians use GPI and not the false god of GDP. So I rest my case on that point. Thank you.
It's interesting, really, that all the panel's talking about ecosystems. You're all avoiding the, no, I want to save the knotted weevil, or I want to save the kakapo, don't we all? Nicola, do you agree with James that DOC is losing the fight? We're losing the fight. We're all losing the fight.
I think where we are working, we're winning, but we're not working everywhere. In fact, we're working on a fraction of New Zealand, and it's simply unrealistic to think that DOC could do all of it. And yet, in Canterbury, I'll give you a really good example. Some of our threatened species only exist on private land. The Canterbury mudfish is only found in drains and waterways here in Canterbury. So it's only found in areas that private landowners have a responsibility to look after. And that one's fascinating to me because you can easily have functional drainage that also supports healthy ecosystems. All you have to do is change the way you do your drainage. So that could be a really simple way that a private community who have this, I mean, if I had a kakapo in my backyard and a bunch of cats, I'd be really really irresponsible citizen, right? Like, it would be a really bad thing to let that kakapo disappear. And yet with things like Canterbury mudfish, which are doubly plagued by having a stupid name, and also living under the water, so unless you've got your snorkel on, you can't. And actually Canterbury mudfish are worse than that, because when it's dry, they go under the ground and they just live there in the dirt. So those are not great advertising features of the Canterbury mudfish, but none of them, as far as I'm aware, or very few of them, are actually within the realms of something that DOC looks after. So I guess it behooves
Which
all
is fortunate for DOC, is it not? Because DOC's stretched already with what it can look after.
This is an endangered species.
In-
It's a
in-
DOC,
yeah.
a DOC employee.
I just wanted to check something with you, Nicola, as well. You know, you lamented the fact that kids are more urban now, and they've got a... Being part of a rural community did not mean wanting to save indigenous species.
No.
I mean, how many waterways were polluted? How many marshes were drained? All right? And that was the problem, was it not?
That's true, but being part of a rural community, my nana in the Catlins is a sheep farmer, and she had a big block of bush up the back of her farm. And both my father and then later myself and my brother spent years playing in that bush and, you know, a little bit destroying it, making huts out of punga trees and all that kind of thing. But knowing the sounds and the smells and the things that lived in that bush, well, we've just heard that we've got 0.5% left of any kind of indigenous bush in this region. So the opportunity for people to connect, and particularly kids to connect, is increasingly gone. And I wanted to talk a little bit about ecosystems too, because I get a hard time from some of my scientist colleagues about being the threatened species ambassador, because it's very 80s. It's kind of back to the future. We're not, you know, we're about ecosystems now. But the point of this role is to use species as a Trojan horse to engage the public in a conversation about ecosystems. Because if you say ecosystems to the wider, not interested general public like our esteemed audience today, they kind of want to know, was it on The Bachelor last night? So it's a sneaky tactic.
And you want to use the, you know, the charismatic megafauna as ambassadors, right?
I'm quite interested in uncharismatic microfauna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in order to get people interested in that, you presumably have to get their hearts on the issue of conservation by means of the kakapo and the kiwi and the takahe.
Yeah, there's a little bit there. We totally exploit all things kakapo and kiwi to tell a wider picture of those things that belong to us and eventually get to the lice.
James, the elephant in the room, you never said 1080, so let's name it.
Oh, goody.
Hooray.
You want 1080 plastered over the South Island.
Everywhere, right through this room, all over the
Yeah.
place.
Wherever a predator might exist.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to end up being the face of 1080, but
You may as well get it out of the way.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get it out of the way. The $17 million is Aerial 1080. So where did those costs come from? They came from Battle for the Birds. Finally, actually, with Battle for the Birds, they recognised South Island, beach masts. Strange things happen during beach masts, so let's spend some money. And I mean, all of the information's there about how well everything did after they did it. The thing that actually really annoys me the most is that we do 1080 for possum control. 500,000 hectares a year to get rid of bovine TB. Nobody says anything. If I talk about 1080 for conservation, I get hate mail. What the hell's the problem, basically? I mean, either A, we need...
Well, it's a matter of amount, isn't it? It's a matter of degree.
Or to be less than 500,000 hectares a year. All I'm talking about is moving where we're doing 1080 control now on the forest pasture margin into the deeper forest. Let's do it. We can afford to do it. I mean, I don't know why we're basically debating it.
There's no way that New Zealand can be predator-free, right? I mean, realistically
Well,
speaking.
yeah, but we couldn't afford it. I mean, the technology is there, yeah, but I don't think we could bite off, what was it, $25 billion to do
All
it.
right, so what you're saying is 1080, 1080, 1080, while we're trying to look at maybe biological control. In the meantime...
A range of tools.
Yeah, a range of tools into the... And I mean, the kind of the thing is I've been involved in a project that's been looking at alternative tools. We want to develop the toolbox.
Yeah.
You can't rely on one thing, okay? We got roughly $2 million a year until this thing called the National Science Challenge came along. How much money now does the government spend under National Science Challenge to control mammalian pests, 2 million a year, 400,000. Okay? What can we do with $400,000? We have a meeting. We get everyone together and we have a meeting. I mean, if they want to take it seriously, then put the money back into it. National Science Challenge, from my point of view, is just a way to cut our funding. Yeah, it was a nice meeting.
Good biscuits. So it's not species, once again we're returning to the theme, it's not species we need to concentrate on saving, it's ecosystems.
Yep.
The inference being that if we can save an ecosystem, species will in a way look after themselves. That's a hard sell, isn't it?
Well, it is, but I think the thing you've got to push is by doing nothing. Sure, I said in my talk, 30% of our land comes under some form of protection. It's not habitat. We've got the habitat. We don't have it in the lowland areas, sure, and in the wetland areas, as other people are talking about. But by doing nothing, we're going backwards. We actually have to stand up now and say, what makes us uniquely New Zealanders? Is it the animal species that we share our country with? Yeah. Well, then let's do something about it.
Te Awhina, charismatic megafauna, yep, but once again you say we need to live, essentially you're saying we need to live mindfully about what we do because everything we do matters in terms of, stomping on a bee. That's again a hard message. It's also a kind of vague message when you're selling to the public. Can you think of a way that you could get that message through? A nice way to live, but you want a social revolution.
Well, I think if we need a social revolution, we should build your wall with 1080 and make this country great again.
As long as we keep out the immigrants.
If you look at Māori whakapapa, I'm going back to being Māori because one of the things about Māori, and you look at Māori whakapapa, is that there is a line in our whakapapa which is very unheard of and it's kept very quiet, and it's a line called the insect people. Māori come from a line of insect people. And the reason we come from this line of the insect people is that even back then they knew that if we didn't have insects, that we would never have the other creatures that come from it. And so it may be a really vague answer to what you're saying, but really it's all about knowing your whakapapa. And if you don't know what your whakapapa is, in this case, it's really difficult to decide on a specific creature or species to save. So if I'm coming from an angle, it's exactly the same as my colleagues, and I'm sorry, I know you said we weren't allowed to pay good cop, bad cop, and I know that you're paying
I
bad
didn't say
cop.
that.
But for me, I want to replace the word ecosystem and replace it with whakapapa, so that you know each line and its connection between each plant, each animal, each vertebrate and invertebrate, and that connection to the land and to the water. So for me, I'm sorry, I'm giving you a beautiful holistic approach to it.
No, but that makes a lot more sense because ecosystem, what does ecosystem mean?
Yeah.
Right. But what it means is we're part of it.
Yeah.
Whakapapa, there you are. Okay. Mike, the Endangered Species Foundation is aiming for a $30 million endowment. How much have you got now?
Well, we haven't actually started the fundraising, so give us a chance. We only started in October.
Where's the money going to come from?
Well, to answer your first question, we're over $1.5 million already without starting the fundraising.
You refused to answer my first question, so I
Yeah.
just moved
I
on.
wanted to put your first question into perspective, shall we say.
What will you do with the money? I mean, you put it away, you'll get the interest of it. What's the priority list?
Well, we have got a priority list, and there's various priority lists around the country, and DOC has its priorities, and the scientists probably have their priorities.
I'm asking you what your priorities are.
Well, I'm getting to our priorities. Okay. We have 10 that we identified that we thought were the 10 species that were closest to extinction, that if we didn't do anything meaningful right now, we ran a real risk of losing them.
The kakapo's not on that list, right?
No.
we've got 125.
There's only one bird on the list. There's only one bird on the list.
What is that bird?
Fairy tern.
Because kakapo's 125. Is that relatively populous compared with the others on your list, or what?
Well, considering that the fairy tern population's been going up by an average of one bird per year for the last 10 years, and I think it's now at about 40.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a bit rarer than the kakapo.
Right. So the kakapo we can relax about, actually, compared with some of the others. It'll be fine.
And in a lot of ways, yes, it would. It wouldn't have been if back in the day, but nowadays they're in a lot stronger shape, and there's been a lot of hard work to get to that point, though.
How does this list of species that you have, New Zealand's most threatened, how do you convert those into action, bearing in mind the ecosystem of the whakapapa concept?
No, you ask the difficult questions. Well, considering that some of the species we have on that list are things that people have never even heard of, we've got a huge battle. We've got one on there that's called, well, we gave it a common name because it didn't have one before. We called it the eyelash seaweed, and it's literally only, centimetre long. It's found on 4 boulders in the Kaikoura Sea.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously.
4 boulders?
Yeah.
Haven't you got a weird little tiny cabbagey thing that's very rare and found only in various north-facing cliffs in Central Otago or something?
Yeah,
like that?
there's a limestone crest that's only found down in some of the limestone areas in the Waitaki Valley. And that was the whole reason of the list, was to take it away. There's something like about 450 species on the nationally critical list, which is the highest priority there can be. But there must be 1 or 2 that are closer to extinction out of that. You can't be, logically, they can't all be exactly close to extinction. So we thought we'll take it through there. And while we agree with the ecosystem approach, there are things that fall through the cracks if you go down that path. And that is a big risk. And also, our ecosystem management is quite risky. Our species management is a lot more proven. Our ecosystem management, we're still probably at the stage of discovering fire.
You mean because it's easy to concentrate on a species?
Yes, and there's been, because people understand rarity and know that something's going to become extinct, people have
Whereas
devoted their
ecosystem's
attention to it.
complicated.
Yeah, and we
Right.
don't know, one thing has an action, and for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, and we don't actually know what that equal and opposite reaction often is.
I understand the ecosystem thing, and I understand that you don't want even the weeniest little seaweed to go extinct, but it's too much, right? I mean, just let that little seaweed go extinct and
Well-
save your money and go to something else. You can't be worrying about everything, can you?
Well, not me personally about all of them, but I'm sure there's some people who actually quite like Kaikoura and may enjoy, crayfishing and think, well, actually I could look after those boulders and pick up a few crays on the way or something like that. All it takes is one person.
The little things are quite often really cheap to look after as
Yeah.
well. So it's not like everything gets X million dollars. It might be that protecting the eyelash seaweed is, I don't know, $2.5 grand a year.
What? How would you protect the eyelash seaweed on 4 boulders of Kaikoura?
That's Mike's job.
No, but I mean,
Have you
the
got a
reason that it's...
Have you got a toothbrush?
Yes.
Yes, well, you could take it out at low tide and actually clean down some of the boulders to give them nice habitat to live on.
Would they like that?
We don't know, but it'll be worth a try.
No.
And it's your toothbrush, not mine.
See, this is going to be fraught with danger, the whole enterprise.
Well, the whole thing is fraught with danger. They're on 4 boulders. We need to do something, and it may take your toothbrush.
I mean, I get that we're in a 6th extinction. I get that it's disproportionate extinction that we're looking at, mass extinction, small period of time. But ultimately, you have to ask whether the eyelash seaweed is destined for oblivion.